Welcome back, TechDenmak. So, as you know, I've been posting a couple things like on my Facebook and stuff like that, converting a lot of the sloppy services that I made to actual TypeScript with like some structure and everything. So let's get started. So the first thing that I did was I had to change some configurations for my my project. So what I did was I added a tsconfig, which right here, which helps the compiling of the TypeScript. Also, what I did was, if you go over to the Gatsby config here, where I added in the TypeScript and everything. So what I'm doing is I'm actually migrating a lot of my the way that I did services. I didn't like the way it was done. I don't know if you noticed that. So let's go back over to main. So let's go to the main branch and let's do a checkout on that. Let's do this. Let's do a get. Let's submit these right here. So let's do a get, add all, and commit -m. Just put cleanup in there. Get push. I don't want to get rid of some of the cleanup I did. So let's switch branches. Let's do a get checkout main. So as you can see, what I did was this was deleted and everything. I just want to show you some of the sloppiness that I was doing with that I didn't like with Gatsby when I had started out doing everything. So I'm starting to harden everything. So see, like right here, where this has no shape or form or anything. This is to authenticate the user. See how we got this right here, where we authenticate the user here. And this has been deleted. Don't worry about that for now. And I just didn't like the way that was done. So for instance, this is what I'm calling a service, which I don't like the way it was done. So see how we got the auth service, and it's just kind of loose out here. I want to be able to like expand this and add things on top of this. You see how we got the session out here, how loose it is? I really don't like the way that is done. So this is what I did. I made quite a few changes to this. And also my login is a lot faster as well when I started making changes to using TypeScript to make some of my services, make some of my implementations and stuff like that. So let's go and do a checkout for the some of the changes I did. So let's go feature / TypeScript. So what I did was I pumped the brakes on everything I was doing because I didn't like the way this implementation was going. It was getting kind of messy. So what I did was I attacked two things: the sessions and the authentication. So for the authentication, if you notice, I did keep, so this is kind of like a migration pattern that I'm doing where I can migrate the new features in and not worry about the old features not being compatible. That's one thing that I like about this approach. So what I'm doing is I'm injecting my new services while I keep the old services intact. So if you notice, the sessions.js is no longer sessions.js. That extension lets Gatsby know, or React, well in this case Gatsby, the Gatsby framework, let it know that it is TypeScript. Okay. I added a couple things. I added models. I'm not using the utility so much. So like for instance, in that session model, what I did was I made a namespace security, and I made an interface called iSession of all the things that's required if you want to use this interface. And so I added some structure to this so it can be reusable. So what I did was I made the session data a session data class, which is in the model, which is a model, and I turned it into iSession, and I implemented to iSession. So this is required to have all of these implemented inside of here. So what I did was I transitioned this over. Okay. So since I got that session data there, we did a couple things too. Now let's talk about what's going to use it. So I actually made a better service. So see how these services stick out right here? I actually re-implemented the services here. So I got a namespace services, and I have the, just for this service right here, this might change a little bit because this is kind of generic. So in here, I might require it to have a fetch and then make some abstraction, make this into maybe an abstract class or something. But for now, just to help with the cleanup, this is how I did it. So insert in the services namespace, I got the iService, which is the actual interface. And then what I did was it implements, well, this session service implements the iService. And what I did was made it into a template form. So the get session, I want to use a template to say, hey, it's going to return this data type. So what I did was copied all the functions that were up here, and I put them into the actual service. Okay, so I put everything into the service. Now let's see how we implemented this service. Okay, so if we go to the authentication, which is still, it was kind of sloppy here because I converted two things. Now in order to call this service, I call the service this way if I left authentication in its state, the state it was in. So what I did was, and remember this is called in the login form. This is the entry point of the login form. So if you go over to login form, which we can go this way. Login form, I already transitioned this, but at first login form was just this right here, which is imported from here, which we no longer need this import, but I left it there to make sure that I didn't make any more breaks. So after we, and then let's get into the authentication service. I did some crazy things with this too. I come from a .NET and Java background, well, PHP, a lot of different backgrounds. And one thing that I do like is to have a good structure, inheritance, etc., to reuse code and to shapeshift some of the functions that I'm writing, to write less code and then leave a pattern for other developers. So let's ignore this right now because we're going to go to the implementation of this service right here, that authentication service. So if we actually go into the customers.js, we can see where we're handling the actual session. So if we go over to customers, and that's one thing I did too, was I converted the customer.js to a TSX. It's not all using TypeScript. I'm just working on getting those services TypeScript. So what I did right here was after we do this and then want to check the session, so the state of the session, I now call this service in order to set the state. So see how we call the service dot get sessions. So, and that's what I did here. So now let's talk about the authentication to get up to this point. So if you go into services, we got data services here, which I didn't convert yet, and we got the auth. So as I said, these are the old auth. It's kind of messy to me. I didn't really like it, and I figured out it was slow, very slow. If you look at some of my previous videos that I put on Facebook, my authentication was just very slow. It hangs. So what I did was I actually made a namespace for authentication, and I made the same pattern that I did for the other service. And what I did was I made it where we can make multiple of these, but we just tell it what we want to inject into it. So for instance, what I did here was the authenticate user is what we want. It doesn't return anything. And then this is the actual service that I'm injecting into this authentication service. So it kind of does an inheritance thing. It's kind of complex, but it's very, very fast. So right here, what I did was I made my authentication service and I made it implement. So this right here is where you see that T. So that T is where I bring that service in. And remember that the iService is also expecting a data type. So I inject that data type for what I want to return. So right here, so when I go into the service, this is what it's going to return if you go to the iService. So if you go over to sessions, and this is that iService right here. And if you notice, I actually carried over for it to return here and all of that. And see how I actually inject this and tell it what object I want it to return. And then right here is that object being carried down, and then it goes into the signatures. So this is where I return some of this stuff here. All right. So let's go back to authentication. So what I did was I copied all of the functions that I had in authentication that was like real loose, and I copied them and put them into here. So right here, this right here is that actual authenticate user, and this is that redirect that we had, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so now when we do the authentication service and we go over to the login form, right here, we just call that service. And I want to make this static in one instance, but I want it to be resilient where it's self-healing, just in case something goes wrong. It can reinstantiate itself or know when to reinstantiate itself. But right here, now we just call the auth service.authenticate user. Okay. So then let's talk about my routing. So since sessions changed, remember I do some things that are really tricky with routing when it wants to check if you have the right to look at that page. Okay. So if you go over to, where's my config at? Let's go to the browser config. So right here, see how I instantiate that service? And what I do right here is once I instantiate that service, I go through here, and now I'm just calling the service and getting the session type. Cleaned it up a bit. I didn't like the way it was going, and this is how I kind of resolved it a bit. Okay. So then one thing that we will have to do is when you go over to the actual nav bars, so when you go out to nav bars here, we have some logic out here for the nav bars where we can tell if we do login or not. See how we got that login here? We go to see how we got that login here, and it determines that. So what all I have to do is go and grab that service right here, whatever service is running it, or whatever's injecting the login flag to this simple nav bar. So if I go over to layouts, maybe like customer layouts, this is where I think this is one of them where I injected. So like right here, see how I got is logged in? I'm gonna have to go through and change all these services where it calls the service.login on the layout level, and then it passes it in instead of pulling it directly from here. I no longer, and this is why I leave the old code in, because you might break a few things, and I don't want to break anything right now. Okay. So after I do that, let's go and take a look on how fast my login is now. So let me do a Gatsby. Let's do a Gatsby clean. And once we do that Gatsby clean, we're gonna go out and do the build for. So right here, like I said, we got the customer here, and then when I grab that customer data and I change the state, what I do is I set everything through here. So your account name, all that stuff, this stuff right here. It might show that it's airing out, but it's really reading it. I might just have to change the way I do some of the implementations and all of that. So let's give it a run. I hate using Windows. Okay, so let's do a Gatsby develop, and let's get that running right now. And then let's see what else we got. Got our services. Oh, let's go over to that login form. There's quite a few things that need to change. Well, no, not anymore, but I kind of linked. What I did was I kind of make it where it changes the state on click. Like I said, I don't know if you noticed in the past when I do the login, it's kind of slow, very very slow. And then we can do like the time challenge and show you how fast it actually runs now. All right. So a couple things that I have to do while this build. I'll just explain a few things. Like I said, I got to change all my nav bars to use that actual service, which I injected here so I can go to the layouts. And that's one thing that I like the way I did some of the things is to make changes. I don't have to go too many places, but at the same time, it gets a little bit more complex. So see how I'm passing in this stuff here. And wherever I grab the login, like right here, I need to instantiate the service and then make it where the service gets that. I want to figure out a way to make the service global where it's static and I can just grab it and it's part of the implementation of this whole thing. So I might figure out a way to do that. And like I said, I'm used to like Java patterns and enterprise patterns and stuff like that. And it might be where I have to include it on each page. But I want to give that Angular pattern like providers and stuff like that. Okay. So now that we got that done, let's talk about this. Let's wait for this build to finish. And once the build finish, look at that. And like I did mention in one of my articles, as you do some of this TypeScript stuff, your build might get a little bit slower. And the reason why my build is slow is because in Linux, my builds are pretty fast. But in Windows, I think because of the cross-platform factor and some of the things it has to do in order to fit to the platform is why it slows down a bit. But we can go back to some of the builds that we did in my Git and compare some of the times if we see any time change. But I do see a performance difference though when the actual site is up. So let's see. It's beautiful. So now let's go over to here. Let's do a refresh. Let's kind of bring this way a little bit like this. And once we do that refresh, let's get it up and running. And so see, it's still spinning. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the sign out. Alright, so let's go customer. And let's go customer. And then let's do a login. And see how fast that was? That was faster than the usual. And everything is working. And if you go and look, let's go and look at this console here. I don't think I did the right, yes I did. So right here, in order to look and see if I'm troubleshooting those services, just to make sure they look right. So see, if you notice, we got that session object out there, which looks good. Let's see if I print out the other stuff. Let's go through here, see if I print out any of those other objects, which I might have took them out. Come on. Yeah, I don't think I print any of them out, but maybe if I go and look in session right here, I'll see like right here, that's that interface we had. See those interfaces right there? See the get login, the get type, and all of that. Refresh session, which I have to write soon. So it means that everything worked. So see how we got this stuff right here. It converted over to objects. We're good to go. Okay, we're good. Pipelines. Somewhere in here where I can see it. Okay, so right here. So the cleanup build took 55 seconds. This build took about a minute. So see, we're at about a minute. Let's go over to the main and see how long those take. See, 2 minutes. You see that? 2 minutes to build. All that stuff that I put in there. But when you go over to the TypeScript changes that I did, it's less than a minute. 55 seconds is here. So you see how quick those builds were? And I'm at like an average of a minute for the stuff that I did. So I just saved myself money because if you look right here on the usage, I get only about 500 minutes per month. So just that small, if you notice, just that small little change makes a difference in budget, makes a difference in money. That's why you get you a good software engineer, and that's why you pay attention to your build times. And then see, we're not waiting. It was only 55 seconds, which is good. So that's all I have. Thanks. I keep you posted. I'm going to keep doing the conversions, and see you later.